Fantastic. Now, John talks about the lead. Do you see it in the forefront that we're able to eliminate the lead component in the fuel?
Yes, I think getting rid of the lead in the near future is very important. I think that the EPA is going to eventually come around and not necessarily mandate it out, but put into effect the necessary items to allow the industry to move out of using leaded fuel, which previously has been technically challenging because the lead really does help in the usage of modern airplane engines as far as detonation and a bunch of other.
How so, Pat, with detonation? How does that help us?
Well, it puts off detonation, basically. Right. So if you were to remove the lead and just take that out, a lot of our high compression engines would start to detonate, which is detrimental to that particular engine. So up until recently, and with Swift Fuel, there really hasn't been any alternative of how to get the lead out and still have the performance that these engines are expected to have. I mean, we have a whole bunch of legacy airplanes out there. It's not as much like the car fleet where there's a turnover. We still use the airplanes that were built back in the 40s. So we have to have something that's going to be able to be used in a wide spectrum of engines that were originally designed to be used with lead. And this fuel does this. This fuel has no lead, and it has a 100-octane rating to it. The fuel has been tested at the FAA's Technical Center in Atlantic City, and they've gone through both the detonation testing and the endurance testing on a relatively demanding Lycoming high-compression engine and found that it passes those particular tests. So we have pretty high confidence that this fuel is going to work out. Now, having said that, there's a lot of testing that we have to do to make sure that it's acceptable to go out into the whole fleet of airplanes. But that's what we're ready to do, and we've put a partnership together in this Green Fleet project that is Embry-Riddle, which is a big operator and engineering operation for aviation and aerospace, Swift, who manufactures the fuel, Lycoming, which they make a lot of the engines that we use, Cessna, which is going to be the first airplane we certify on this, and AvFuel, which is the largest non-petroleum-owned fuel distributor in the United States. So I think with those 5 partners, this green fleet is really going to push ahead, and I think we're going to see the first renewable fuels certified in R172s here in the near future.
Mm-hmm. Is it true? I had heard that the lead is now coming from England. Is that correct?
Yeah, I hear there's only one source, and I think that's true. So that's another issue, is that we're sole sourcing a big part of our economy.
Sure.
And lead isn't very pleasant stuff. To make a quote, even in small quantities, it's detrimental to our health. So if we can avoid it, we'd like to do that.
Mm-hmm. Great. And John, your company is already producing this fuel. Are you using it already, and what results are you seeing?
Well, at this point, we're producing test quantities of the fuel because we're not certified, so we can't fly it in a standard certificated aircraft. We're limited to experimental only. We're producing the fuel at a fairly reasonable rate. We're getting ready to scale up now to over 200,000 gallons a year at our pilot production facility. So that will allow us to continue to generate the test fuel, not only for the Green Fleet program, but other testers that we bring into the fold. And this will allow us to continue, like Pat said, to accumulate the data and push forward. Now, we need as much third-party data as we can. Not noticing any issues, and it's just a matter of scaling at this point. But we know we can cover the market of 300 to 360 million gallons a year, which is the total 100 low-lead market in the U.S. We know we can cover that with maybe 4 or 5 small retrofitted plants to produce this.
Mm-hmm. When would you project, I mean, if you were to look out on the horizon, when would you see this being online for general aviation?
Well, it's a quite of a conundrum, if you will. We can estimate out into the future 1 to 2 years for final certification. That's assuming that everything goes as planned. See, there's no mechanism in place for the FAA to certify fuels. They can only certify components, engines, and airframes on fuels, and not certify fuels on pre-existing certificates. So we have to chase our certification through the ASTM, which is the American Society for Test and Materials, and they're kind of the research arm of the FAA. We gain our approval through ASTM, which is an industry collective body, and then go in front of the FAA This process hasn't been done in over 40 years. No one's come up with a new fuel. We went from 100 to 100 in low lead, but the fuel compositionally was really the same. So we're coming up with something completely different, and we need to kind of find out that mechanism. And really that mechanism is unknown in the FAA. We're going to push forward with Embry-Riddle, and maybe Pat can talk a little how that's going to play out on their end.
And that's true. A lot of the stuff that we're doing right now is actually going through and revisiting the FARs and all the other standards to actually see how you navigate through those to approve a fuel. Like John said, it's not certified. The FAA doesn't certify fuel, so we have to figure that out. And we're working with the people in Washington and in Oklahoma City on what is the plan to actually do that. And believe it or not, that's taken a while. We want to get a consensus, so we're not just pushing it through. We're trying to get everybody on board that they believe in the plan, and that the plan is a safe plan for all of us that also gets the lead out and gets us to a renewable fuel. So there's been a lot of discussion with a lot of people on how you do this, and we're getting pretty close now. So I'm pretty confident that we're going to move out of this area where it's more political of how into the more technical aspects of let's go do this.
Mm-hmm. And John, last question before we bring your colleague up. You've had this ongoing relationship with not only Embry-Riddle, but are you involving other companies?
Yeah, as Pat mentioned, the fold-in with the Green Fleet program is instrumental. We have to have as many the stakeholders involved as possible, and we all need to kind of move on the same path. We can't be doing 5 different paths because that's just counterproductive. We've obviously involved many other manufacturers outside of the ones we mentioned through the ASTM because they're all members, all the light engine and airframe manufacturers, and so we're trying to involve as many of them as possible. I'm also the Gamma board delegate for Swift Enterprises, and so we're trying to work through Gamma with their industry members and trying to just bring as many people involved as possible. But the folks we're working with at Green Fleet here, the group of companies Pat mentioned, working very close with them on equipment, time, personnel to try and make this happen. So got a really good group there.
All right, John, thanks so much. I'll bring your associate on board as I ask another question then to Pat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. What results are you seeing, Pat? I mean, the engines are cleaner, or the results, the powers setting on these engines? What are you finding?
Well, we're finding a lot of interesting stuff. First of all, we have reviewed the Tech Center's reports on the full certification type tests of the, again, high compression Lycoming engine, and see that the detonation test passed, the endurance test, and then that was sent up to Lycoming to be torn down. And yes, we do see less deposits, less wear. This fuel actually has more lubricity than avgas, so that's sort of interesting. With those results, what we've done is we've come in and come up with an intermediary step prior to certifying our 172s, which is getting operational experience with the fuel to make sure it is exactly the right formulation before we push into certification. And that step is to run it in a twin-engine Seminole, which is what we have here at Sun in front right now. So this Seminole did fly in on Swift fuel, and we have it in one side to mitigate a lot of the risks of operating, a single engine on a new fuel. Being a big university, we're very cautious and safety conscious about what we do, so we'd like to really understand what we're getting ourselves into, and the Seminole was the best way to do that, using a twin-engine airplane. So we've got about 30 hours of flying time on this engine at this point.